Hello there, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about my favourite film books. I'm doing a top 10, which sounds a bit unusual for me, but it's just a favourites list. It's not like objective, these are the 10 best film books. These are just the 10 books on filmmaking that I prize above others. Now I'm going to give you a couple of extras that they didn't make the list, but I prize anyway. So you've got a lot of the On series from Faber and Faber. So you've got Cronenberg On Cronenberg, Schrader On Schrader, Sayles On Sayles, Scorsese On Scorsese. Now, I'm doing one of those director series as one of my favourites, but these ones I only want to do one, so I decided I'll highlight some, but there's only one and then top 10. I just thought that would be fairer, really. So all of those are very good books. The Schrader On Schrader one, you get a lot of his writings about when he was a critic in the 60s. All of them look into the past of the directors, what influenced them, what was the problems about each project, what was the advantage of each project. It was their point of view on these projects. There's also other ones like Lynch on Lynch. That's also excellent. But the four I mentioned, the Cronenberg, the Schrader, the Sayles, and the Scorsese, are probably the most practical. If you want to know about filmmaking, you want to know about mixing theme and production and all the rest of it. But those are the ones that are really good how-tos for people who are interested in filmmaking beyond just being fans. So those four are definitely recommend. But there's one that rises even above those ones that I'll get to in the top 10. There's also, I'd say, the Projection series that John Boorman was the editor of for years. It goes all the way up to like Projections 11 or 12. I read quite a lot of them. It's a format where you get like diaries, you get a variety of interviews and different subjects being brought up. They are very, very well put together books. I'd highly recommend all of them. Just go get them. They're great. They're now a bit dated because they came from the 90s and the early 2000s, but it gives you a good mindset of what people were into that time and what was the passions at that time. So definitely go and get those. And also, the final one is this, In the Blink of an Eye, which is the Walter Murch book and editing. As you see, I'm going through it again. So it's very good for future editors about what editing is. There are other books on filmmaking around. There's Cameron Crowe Talk to Billy Wilder. That's not in my collection. There's all sorts of books in filmmaking that I will not include here that are great, but I'm trying to kind of keep it limited to what I'd say are the best ones. So for me, I'm trying not to give you a massive list. Okay, so there we go. That's the introduction away, and now we'll go to the list itself. So at number 10, and again, these are just of my favourites, but all these books I recommend, and I'll explain why each one. The first one is On Filmmaking from Alexander McKendrick. Now, McKendrick was a director in the 50s and 60s. Before his career collapsed, he worked in scripts for Alien after the war. He graduated to be a director. He did The Lady Killers. He did Sweet Smell of Success. He did The Maggie. He did Mandy. He did the Man in the White Suit, which is a big favourite of mine. He did tons of really great films. And essentially, his early stuff, up to Sweet Smell of Success, I would rate really highly. Later on, he got in trouble with studios in America, and a lot of the films he made weren't really what he wanted. So there was a certain point in his career collapsed because he was a director who knew what he wanted, and some studios didn't like that, and he just had some problems with them. But there we go. But this book comes out of the fact that it was edited by Paul Cronin. And the reality is, These are a lot of notes he made and a lot of his lectures, because he set up, once his career had finished, they needed someone to set up a film school in, I think it was Los Angeles, and he became the top lecturer there and the guy who organised it all. And a lot of this comes from his teaching to students. And it's full of things it's all about practicalities of scripting, of filmmaking, of things you might want to do in a film, like dream sequences that might actually have a lot of pitfalls that lead you down a path that might not be helpful to you, even if you're intrigued by the concept of them. So it's a practical look at filmmaking for students. And that's why I'm bringing this up. It's an excellent book. I read it years ago, but when I was a film student, I didn't have it. I really wish I had, because it would have been really helpful. Because it just is from someone who's done the job well, and you get an idea of what filmmaking is, both on the side of what can you practically do and what should you do if you want to be successful. It's less so about the deep meaning themes of anything. It's more about the practicalities of making the films. Because I think the idea is filmmakers should work out what their own themes are. You can't tell people what to make films about, but you can tell them what you can actually do in filmmaking. Number 9 is 100 Years of Japanese Film by Donald Richie. This is the updated version. This is out of print, so you're going to have to pay a fortune to try to get it if you want it. You get the guide, but you also get a guide of films that are on video and home media to try and find them and see what you can do. The reason I bring this up is this is even though I don't agree with everybody in the book, this is a great book to have as you get into Japanese film, to get an idea of who's worth seeing, so you're not just focused on Kurosawa. Because believe it or not, Kurosawa's not the best Japanese director. He's a good director, but there's plenty of Japanese directors who I would definitely rate higher than Kurosawa. Like my favourite Japanese director is Ozu. He'll come up in another book later on. And there's just a huge amount of Japanese directors come through the same system as Kurosawa that weren't as big in the West, but actually made films that were worth seeing, that were wonderful. So this became a really good guide to what was interesting. He's especially good at the older films. Later on, he's a bit sniffy about some of the more modern films for my taste, but the earlier films he's great on, and he loves these films, and he can be critical. And it's just a really good guide if you're into Japanese film. Because Japanese film goes all the way back to the 20s and it went through different eras. And it's, well, for me, it's if you want to go to Asian films, Japan's the place to go for the really good, solid films throughout history, where there's always some good stuff, and there's, because Japan went through so much, and there's different eras in Japanese cinema, and the directors went through so much. There's history, but there's also variation. So Japan's like, if you want to go to Asia into like historical films, Japan's a place to start, and then other places like Korea and Hong Kong came out later on, but Japan was like the long-term, filmmaking giant of Asia. So I'd definitely recommend this if you can get hold of it. I think at the moment you have to go through like second-hand bookshops to try and find this one. And I think I had to buy it like on eBay or something like that. I think that's how I bought it. It's one of those ones where you just have to keep on looking, because it has been in print for a long time, because the author has been dead for years. So this is like a book that's focused on the last century, so it hasn't been republished, which is a shame because it should be. So number 8 is Fritz Lang, The Nature of the Beast by Patrick McGilligan. This is an excellent book, and as you can see, it's all very well thumbed. This I actually got when I was on holiday one year, and I went through quite a lot. I got this like 25 years ago, so it's been well thumbed by this point. I got this at the turn of the century, 2000, year 2000. That's why I remember it, because I was down meeting a friend for the year 2000. That's when I found it. This is a great book about Fritz Lang, who was the great German director of the first half of the 20th century. There were other great German directors like Murnau, who had a briefer period of brilliance. But Fritz Lang went through like different periods. He had Lubitsch and all these other great directors, but Fritz Lang was probably the longest lasting one. He's almost like a typical German director. Like, you did not want to be in his sets. He was in charge, and he'd be brutal to people and make them work insane hours to get his vision across. He started off doing these epics in Germany where he was the top guy. He did Dr. Mabuse, he did Metropolis, all the epics, Die Nibelungen. He did the epic films. He had a special place in his heart for like spy thrillers. In the 30s he moved on to more, after Metropolis bombed, he went into more compressed films like M and The Testament of Dr. Mabuse. And at some point he left Germany when the Nazis came in, because he was partly Jewish and he didn't quite trust them to say, that's okay, we know you're a bit Jewish, but it doesn't matter. He left anyway. There are different points of view of why he left, and this book goes into that. The book goes into a lot of things that he probably wished no one would go into. That's what's good with the book. It's like, this is a great director, but he's also a scumbag in a lot of ways. And it points out all these ways, but also points out where he was good. Like, he became, when he was in America, he was anti-Nazi. He was like one of the like people like Billy Wilder and him were publicly anti-Nazi. Like, Wilder couldn't stand him, but he had to admire the fact that Lang was on their side of like, these guys are scumbags. So in America he went on to do studio films where he had to deal with lower budgets and compressed running times, where he suddenly changed his style and became a really interesting director of studio films. And he did some great stuff like Big Heat. And just a variety of really cool films. He did stuff with Edward G. Robinson, which was terrific. He would fall out with people all the time though because of his manner. And this book goes into all the things he did wrong that caused him, made sure that he wasn't going to have a great career. He did himself in a lot of ways when he could have been nicer to people, because he's so used to being dismissive of people in Germany because he was a big guy in Germany. They never learned to adjust, and he could look down different actors he was working with and think of them as idiots, and it's like, these are important people and you're behaving badly to them. So he goes through all his career and how it slowly fell away and his return to Germany at a certain point. It's a really interesting book about a great director and shows you the human side and the fact that we like to glorify our directors, but a lot of them have major problems, and you should be aware of that. A lot of time people's careers are mapped by their problems, and we don't look into that as much as we probably should. Now we have Herzog on Herzog, which is, if I'm counting right, number 7. Herzog on Herzog is the director and director book that I chose as the best one, because Werner Herzog is very practical. He does very artistic films, very moving films, but he also does them in difficult conditions, and he has very definite ideas of what's good and what's bad in filmmaking and the arts, and he's very practical and will just walk from one place to another if he feels like it. And he's like, you don't need film school, you just have to make films. You just have to find a way to get the equipment and make films, and that's how you're going to learn to make films. And the reason this book is probably the highest amongst them is he has a really good career of different types of films he made in the 60s and 70s. He was doing like a lot of stuff with Kinski, a lot of other stuff with Bruno, but he's also making documentaries. And when his feature film career kind of ended after Fritz. He did another one with Kensky after that, but it found it much hard to get financing for his films after that. So he made a lot of documentaries for a while before he found his way back into directing fictional films. So he's got two careers. He's got the documentary career and he's got his fictional film career. And he's made some amazing films. Films I adore, like Heart of Glass, are amazing. Aguirre, Wrath of God is stunning. The one they did with Bruno were amazing. Fatima Morgana is amazing. There's so many great films he's made, but he also talks practically in his book about them, what he did, why he did things, the problems he had, and just a general outlook in his career, about how her career can keep going over time and can deal with setbacks and can just adjust to what's going on in the film world to keep going until the world has changed again, so it's good for you to make films again. So this goes into his career all the way through, or at least until the 90s, because at a certain point, the Faber and Faber books, these on directors, were popular in the 90s. So that's when you don't really get his comeback so much. You really just get the changeover from fiction to documentaries, but it's still fascinating. So I'd highly recommend that if you're interested in practical filmmaking, this is the one to read. Number 6 is Kubrick, the Michael Herr one. It was actually originally, it was 2 articles for Vanity Fair during the release of Eyes Wide Shut. So the first one came out after Kubrick died, because he was Kubrick was trying to get Herr to do a PR thing for Eyes Wide Shut, and he never did it. And then when he died, he wrote a piece for Vanity Fair around about the time the film was about to come out, talking about Kubrick, the good parts, the bad parts, but basically written about Kubrick by a guy who knew him. Because Herr knew Kubrick for 20 years, his last 20 years of Kubrick's life, and they worked together on Full Metal Jacket, and they still talked after that, and they were pals basically. Like, Herr was one of Kubrick's pals, and he respected Kubrick, but he also thought he was a cheap bastard at times. And there's a second half, which is also about the film itself, which is about his response to the film and the general response to the film critically. And there's other Kubrick books. There's a John Baxter book, there's a Vincent Labuto book, both of which I read. I liked the Labuto book a lot more than the Baxter book, but and they get into a lot of details about the productions of his films and the various things, people like him, not like him. But this one gives an idea of who he was actually, and how he interacted with people, and what his relationships were, and how in some ways he was difficult, in some ways he was good. And there's a documentary called Filmmaker about his assistant, who's covered in his book as well, Vincent, can't remember the name now, something in my head, but who's an actor who became his assistant, and it gets into his life as well with Kubrick. So there's a lot of good Kubrick books. There's an annoyed one by the guy who wrote Eyes Wide Shut, who really hated working with him, but that was kind of disregarded as something that was like some kind of revenge thing, because Kubrick couldn't respond because he died. But this one's the best one. This is the one to really read if you really want an idea of what Kubrick was like, good and bad. And the Labuto one's also recommended, but the others you can take or leave. Right. Now we've got Getting Away with It, the Soderbergh book. Now Soderbergh had done some diaries when he released his screenplay for Sex, Lies and Videotape, when that first came out. He was talking about the making of the film, his diaries of during the making of the film, during the post-production, and going to Cannes and winning the Palme d'Or. And it was a really good book. I read it when it came out, and the film was wonderful. So, but this takes place but 5 years later, when Soderbergh has had an up and down follow-up. He had Kafka, which was a disaster. Then he had King of the Hill, which was wonderful. Then he had Underneath, which was a disaster. So his career had been up and down. in a way that has continued. Like, Soderbergh's a director who's hit or miss. When he hits, it really hits, but he misses, it can really be bewildering. So, but this is when he was having an existential crisis about what he's doing and what he should be doing, because he felt his filmmaking was too formal and wasn't enough of his own personality in there. So at the same time he was doing interviews for a book with Richard Lester, who was the great director of the 60s and 70s, an American director who moved to Britain. He made the first two Beatles films. He made How I Won the War, The Bed Sitting Room, Petulia, Juggernaut, 3 and 4 Musketeers, Cuba, The Royal Flash, Superman 2 and 3. He had a big career, and some of the films were like big successes, other ones did less good. But he was a director who Soderbergh looked up to because he did a variety of films, and he could move on from a disaster to a good film without an issue. He also did Robin and Marion, which is an excellent film. I knew there was one important one I was forgetting. And Lester would literally go from one film to the other. He would do a bunch of them. Then at a certain point, he kind of, his career stalled after Superman 3 when the film business changed and the films he was trying to make weren't getting financed. So he did Superman 3 basically because some other film he wanted to do fell through, and it was like, okay, we'll do this, and hopefully the sense of this will get these other films made. But his career kind of fell away at a certain point. But he did a lot of really good films, and he's one of those directors whose films were always on TV, so any British director were influenced by Richard Lester. Whether they know or don't know it, he was omnipresent. So Soderbergh did interviews talking about the practical side of filmmaking and the business side as he was trying to work out his own career path. So it's interesting for two reasons. First is the interviews with Richard Lester talking about not just the films but his view of life and where things have gone and the disasters they faced and the dealing with actors and all the difficulties of dealing with crew and all that. But it's also sort of about trying to realign. And by the end of the book, he's done one or two experimental films. He's about to go and make Out of Sight, which is a film that's going to launch him back into the mainstream and set up the rest of his career. So it's a fascinating look at two different directors at different times in their career. Lester, who'd retired at that point, and Soderbergh, who was pretty early on still in his career. So still highly recommended. If you can get hold of it, it is wonderful. It's one I always go back to because it is wonderful to see, to find out. But when you rewatch a Lester film, you go back to the bit where they talk about that film, and you get some interesting things. But also just talking about the Beatles of the films, who was the best actor, who was the worst actor, all the rest of it. So now we're going to number 4. This will be kind of briefer than some of the other ones. It's Transcendental style in film. Transcendental style in film. I always get that word messed up. Ozu, Bresson, Paul Schrader. This is the old. There's been a. He's actually added some stuff to it, but I got this one, years ago. It's even signed. I got him to sign it when he was up promoting Dominion in 2005, and I was actually working up in the Edinburgh Festival at the time, so I got it signed. This is an important book for me, both for reading it and seeing an actual filmmaker taking filmmaking seriously, but also when I read it, I'd only really watched Bresson when I'd read it. I was already into Bresson quite a bit. I'd seen most of the films talked about in this book, because when I was up in Edinburgh when I went to Edinburgh Festival in the late 90s, they did a Bresson season, so I saw a lot of his films on the big screen, which is it's a great way to get introduced to Bresson. So I knew Bresson, and I'd seen some of his other films in GFT, Glasgow Film Theatre as well. So at Bresson I was pretty good with from having seen the films. I think at that point I'd even seen some of the kind of harder to get hold of films. Ozu, I had not seen when I'd read the book, and neither had seen Dreyer. But this book got me into both those directors. And Ozu is now one of my favourite directors of all time. Bresson is also one of my favourite directors of all time. But Ozu is kind of in the top 3, and Bresson is like the top 5. And Dreyer isn't in the top ones, but I'm a big fan of Dreyer as well. So it was interesting to read about these great directors and then get inspired to watch a lot of the films. Like, from this, I went through a massive thing of buying all these Ozu films from Hong Kong, where you could buy them in bulk and you get all these, like, Ozu films that were like the stuff now that the BFI release, but I was getting them in really rough condition just to see the films. I've now got quite a lot of those films on proper discs and Blu-ray. There's some I still don't have in Blu-ray that I've still got in old Bo Ying releases. So yeah, this book cost me a lot of money to bring stuff in from China, from Hong Kong. In Dreyer, they had releases on from BFI, and I soon caught up with Dreyer films and realised how great he was. But this book, just the importance to me of this book is it took seriously some serious, difficult directors and made me see them as approachable. They weren't just, even though Schrader writes seriously, he also has a understanding of, he's writing about films people should see. So the book got me into watching these directors, and the film were approachable after reading the book rather than just being icons. Now, I've not read this book for a long time, but I remember reading it. I remember being really impressed by it, and its influence on me is one of the reasons why it's one of my favourites. Even though it's, of all the books, this is probably the one I go back to least, but it's still important for the influence it had on me. I really should buy the updated version, but I'm still quite happy to have this one. Right. Number 3, Nightmare Movies, Kim Newman. This is the updated version. There's like 3 different versions of this book. There's one from 1984, where it was the basic book. Then in 1988, Newman updated it to be the book that I initially read, which I read when I was the early 90s, I think, or late 80s, early 90s. It was one of those books. It was one of those expensive books you buy or you get bought for you at Christmas because you can't afford it yourself when you're still like a teenager. And you read it and you read it and you read it and you read it, and it's all well thumbed, and it's all about what horror movies should I see. And it's basically, the thing is, it's kind of the gateway to me from taking horror seriously, of what can be serious and what can't be serious. Things I'd already kind of intuited on my own, and also it was how horror was broader than I thought what you'd think, and it was a good gateway to a lot more serious filmmaking. That I was already intuiting because I was watching some serious films and some more horror films, because horror was a film genre I like. I've always liked it. But it was a good way of explaining where themes from horror could also go through to more serious approaches to the genre. And it separated into different categories, like the zombie movie, the Italian zombie movie, ghost story, the auteurs of the genre, which was like Brian De Palma, Dario Argento, Larry Cohen, and David Cronenberg. And talking about their careers and where it went and how serious they were and how went in different directions, and it just was like a serious look at horror that I just needed at the time, but also was a great catapult to go to get interested in people like Bresson and things. It was like via other directors who are more serious and building up to becoming like a world cinema fan. So that's what this is, a good gateway book to me to take genre seriously, but also what was a wide range of films I had not seen that were important to see. And also wrote about it intelligently and about the variety that a genre can have. He also did a very good one about westerns, Wild West movies. He did one about post-apocalyptic movies, millennium movies. So Newman's done a lot of interesting books about cinema. Now this is an updated version. It's already 40 bits, as you can see, because I've looked through it quite a lot. He updated the version, so the second half of the book's now a bit a new book, basically from the 2000s, talking about what followed the original book, and about the different conventions. There's more tours they talked about, and there's more about certain directors, what they brought to the genre since then. I still prefer the original, because I think the original had better films to talk about. And it had a whole grasp of films from like the 60s all the way through the 70s and the 80s. In the 90s and the 2000s, there were some good films, but there was also a lot of trashier films. I don't think there was as much to write about in the second half. But still, of course, Newman's a good writer. It's still an interesting book, the second half. But I still basically go back to the first half when I'm reading the book. And also there's like footnotes of how things have changed. So if you want to know about certain directors and their careers after the Newman wrote about them in the first book, you get these like little footnotes doing updates with things. So this is an excellent book, very influential to me, which is why it's one of my top favourites. And it's definitely one of the most read books. Number 2 is much shorter. Number 2 is Robert Bresson's, which is Notes on the Cinematographer. And this is just little sayings about life and about filmmaking that Bresson wrote. Now you can get books of interviews with Bresson as well, but this is just brilliant because you can dip in, dip out, and get some wonderful thoughts on filmmaking, on just general life. But it's just about filmmaking from his point of view and how he sees it, but through very short notes. And I find it just very refreshing, and it's a nice thing to dip in and out of. And some books can be really big, and other books can be simple like this. But I'd highly recommend anyone who sees it with film to buy this book, because it is wonderful. And number 1, this is something I've now got on Kindle, the updated version. This is one of the older versions. The Biographical Dictionary of Film by David Thomson. I've read a lot of books by Thomson. I agree with a lot of stuff he says. There's some stuff I don't agree with. He dislikes certain directors that I love, like Brian De Palma. But there's also film directors that I never could stand, like John Ford, that he hates too. And he's a big like Howard Hawks fan. So this is a fascinating book. I think that's the first version of the book I bought. This is like £15 when I bought this. I bought this when I was a film student. I think it was a case of, okay, it's Christmas, this is the book I want. And I think I was like on it for like days. And also it was like a book, when I would go into a bookshop, I'd flick through it and then walk away after reading another 1 or 2 other entries. So I bought the updated versions. There's like 3 updated versions in my house. But I've also got the most recent one on the Kindle. I'm sure if he does another one, I'll update another version, because it's been a while since he's updated. I'll probably buy it as a book form again, because it actually is easier just to flick through the book to see it. Because Kindle is hard to find what you're looking for. But yeah, I mean, the updates it, but it's only small updates. There's certain things that have remained the same. And so, but that's the one of the ones I always go back to read, to flick through. Even if I don't agree with what he writes, it's quite interesting to see what he's writing about certain people and what his views are on certain people. Certain directors he just can't stand, and his views on them are very dismissive, and then maybe some films I adore. There's other ones he's brutal about that actually is fairly accurate. So it depends on your taste. But you have, I think, things as you get older, you realise people can have valid different views on something new, and it's fine. You don't have to get too bothered about it. So that's my top 10 favourite film books. Those are them. I hope you enjoyed it. But that's me. I don't think I can talk any more about books. So I'll see you later.